Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of Boss Up and Glow Up with Lexi Sample. I am your host, and today we're going to talk about something that I feel like a lot of us do, but kind of unintentionally. Sometimes we're aware of it, but it's going to be about why you shut down when things get hard. All right, so let's start with something I know you've experienced. And even if you never had the words for it, there's a moment where life just doesn't explode, but it also doesn't feel fully okay. Nothing dramatic is happening, no emergency, no crisis, but inside, something feels really tight. Tasks that used to feel manageable suddenly feel heavy. Messages sit unanswered even though you care about that person. Decisions feel impossible. Your body feels tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. And the most confusing part is you want to show up. You want to move forward. You want to handle it, but you can't. So you pull back, you disconnect, you go quiet, and then comes all the self talk. What is wrong with me? Why do I always do this? Other people handle stress way better than I do. I'm sabotaging myself. This is the moment most people turn on themselves. And it's also the moment most people miss what's actually happening because what you're experiencing is not a character flaw. It's not laziness. It's not avoidance for no reason. It's a shutdown response. And once you understand that, everything about your behavior starts to make sense. Shutdown is one of the most misunderstood nervous system responses because it doesn't look the way people expect stress to look. And when we talk about stress responses, most people picture super intense situations where fights look loud, fights look like anger, snapping, control, overfunctioning, pushing harder. Flight looks busy. Flight looks like distraction, avoidance, staying constantly occupied with things, running away from your feelings. But both of those responses move energy outward. Shutdown does not. Shutdown looks like still. And because it looks like stillness, people assume it's intentional. They assume it's a lack of effort. They assume it's avoidance. They assume it's a character issue. But shutdown is not something you choose. It is something that happens when your nervous system decides that movement is not safe. That distinction matters more than almost anything in healing because when you think shutdown is a choice, you respond to it with judgment a little bit. And when you respond with judgment, your nervous system interprets that as more of a threat. Let's slow this down. Okay. Your nervous system has a hierarchy of responses. First, it tries engagement, then it tries mobilization, fight, or flight. But when neither fighting nor escaping feels possible or safe, the system does something very specific. It conserves. This is freeze, okay? Freeze is not panic. Freeze is not drama. Freeze is you protecting yourself very quietly. And it's your body saying, if I cannot solve this, I cannot get away from it. I will slow everything down just so I don't get hurt. So your system shifts gears. Your heart rate drops not because you're calm, but because your body is conserving energy. Your energy drops because activation feels unsafe. Your motivation drops because motivation requires forward movement, and forward movement feels risky at the time. Your cognitive flexibility drops, which means you struggle to problem solve, prioritize, or think creatively. And this is why you feel foggy. This is what brain fog is, you guys. This is why you stare at your to do list and just cannot complete it, can't check anything off of it. This is why answering a simple message feels so overwhelming. This is why decisions that used to be so easy suddenly feel impossible. Your system is not malfunctioning, it is doing exactly what it was designed to do in a perceived threat. And here's the part most people miss. When you are in shutdown, your prefrontal cortex is offline. That is a part of your brain responsible for logic, planning, and rational thought. So when people tell you to just think positive or just push through, it feels impossible because it is. You cannot use higher level thinking to override a lower level survival response. That's like telling someone to relax while your body is bracing for impact. The problem isn't your mindset. The problem is that your body does not feel safe enough to mobilize. This is why shame makes shutdown worse. When you tell yourself, I'm lazy, I should be able to handle this, other people do harder things, your nervous system hears, I'm not safe. So it doubles down on protection, and suddenly you feel even more stuck, not because you are resisting action, but because your body is prioritizing safety over productivity. This is the reframe that changes everything. You are not broken. You are not unmotivated. You are not avoiding life because you don't care. You are in a psychological state that requires safety, not force. And once you understand that, you stop trying to fight yourself. You start learning how to work with your system instead of against it. And that's when you really start to change. This is the part where most people get confused because when things get hard, the logical assumption is that your body should rise to the occasion, that you should just become more focused, more motivated, more driven. So when the opposite happens, when you feel slower, heavier, less capable, you assume something is wrong. But your nervous system does not respond to difficulty by trying harder. It responds to a perceived threat by trying to keep it safe. And safety doesn't always look like action. Sometimes safety just looks still and flat and quiet. Your nervous system is not interested in long term goals. It's not interested in your potential. It's not interested in who you can become. It is interested in one thing and one thing only: survival. So, when a situation feels overwhelming, your body doesn't ask, what would help me grow? It asks, what would help me survive this moment? And if your system has learned that effort leads to more pain, pressure, or disappointment, it will not mobilize. It will conserve. This is where shutdown comes into play because your body chooses shutdown not because you cannot handle things, but because it learned that engaging costs too much. Let that sit. If at any point in your life trying harder makes things worse, your nervous system is taking notes. If expressing emotions led to conflict, your system learned that expressing yourself was unsafe. If asking for help led to rejection or inconsistency, your system learned that relying on others was risky. If making mistakes led to criticism or shame, your system learned that effort increased danger. So, when something today even resembles those feelings, your body responds the same way. Not because the situation's identical, but because that sensation is familiar to it. Your nervous system doesn't track time the way your mind does. It doesn't distinguish between the then and now. It distinguishes between safe and unsafe. So, when your chest tightens, when your stomach drops, when your energy collapses, your body is responding to a felt previous memory, not something logical or current. And this is why shutdown can often feel kind of confusing because you're going to think, oh, nothing bad is happening. I've dealt with worse. Why can't I handle this? But your body is responding to the facts, it is responding to the pattern. And here's something important: shutdown often happens when you feel trapped. Trapped in expectations, trapped in responsibility, trapped in relationships, trapped in decisions that you cannot easily escape. Fight and flight require options. Freeze happens when there's none, okay? So your body chooses to just sit still, not because you're giving up, but because it's conserving resources. Think of shutdown like a circuit breaker. When the load is way too high, the system shuts down to prevent damage. It's not malfunction, it's protection. And this is why telling yourself to just push through always backfires because pushing signals danger to a system that is already overwhelmed. Pressure does not create safety, it creates more threat. So your nervous system does the only thing it knows how to do: it slows you down, it pulls you inward, it reduces stimulation, it waits. This is also why shutdown is often paired with guilt. Because intellectually, you know you're capable, but biologically, your body is in a different state. So you feel split, and that split creates shame. But here's the truth that you need to hear: Your body choosing shutdown does not mean you are incapable. It means your system believes it needs protection right now. Once you stop interpreting shutdown as failure, you can start responding to it with curiosity instead of criticism. And curiosity is the doorway to regulation. Shutdown does not appear in adulthood. People often assume that because they functioned fine for years, the shutdown they experience now must mean something has gone wrong. But shutdown is not about suddenly becoming incapable, it is about capacity being exceeded, and capacity is shaped over time. Most shutdown patterns are formed not through one dramatic event, but through repeated experiences of emotional overwhelm without enough support. This is important because it removes the idea that something is wrong with you. What is happening now is connected to what your nervous system learned then. Many people who experience shutdown grew up in environments where they had to self regulate a little too early. They were the responsible one, they were the emotionally mature one, the one who didn't cause problems, the one who adapted. And adaptation looks functional on the outside. You learned how to push through. You learned how to stay connected. You learned how to stay composed. You learned how to handle things quietly. But that composure came at a cost. Because when you learn early that your feelings are inconvenient, unsupported, or overwhelming to others, your body learns to contain them, not release, not express, contain. And containment takes energy, and over time, that energy is going to run out. Shutdown often appears later in life, not because you're weaker, but because you're tired and over it. You're tired of holding it together, you're tired of being strong, tired of carrying things internally with no outlet. Other common origin of shutdown is unpredictability. We talked about this one before. When you grow up in environments where emotional responses are inconsistent, where you don't know what reaction you're gonna get, your nervous system stays on high alert all the time. And eventually, high alert becomes very unsustainable. So the system chooses the opposite, and that is shut the fuck down. Shutting down becomes safer than vigilance. Numbness becomes safer than feeling. And this is not a conscious decision, it's a biological one. Your nervous system is always choosing the option that requires the least amount of energy that keeps you safe. And when fight and flight are exhausted, freezing becomes the default. Shutdown can also develop when you learn that effort doesn't change outcomes. If you tried to communicate and you weren't heard, if you tried to ask for help and nothing changed, if you tried to explain and you were misunderstood, your system learned something very specific. It learned engagement doesn't work. So over time, it just shuts down. And that is why shutdown often shows up in relationships. You don't stop caring, you stop reaching because reaching has historically led to disappointment or pain. And again, this is not about weakness, it is about learning. Here's something most people don't realize: shutdown is often the final adaptation. Before shutdown, there was most likely trying harder, caring more, overfunctioning, overgiving. And when that didn't lead to safety or relief, your system just switched strategies. And this is why people who shut down are often deeply caring. They didn't start numb, they became numb because caring without safety is exhausting. So when shutdown shows up now, it's not a sign that you don't care anymore. It's a sign that your system is protecting itself from overload. This is also why shutdown can feel sudden. You might think, oh, I was fine last week, but the nervous system doesn't collapse gradually in ways that we notice. It holds, it holds, it holds, and then it conserves, not because you failed, but because that load just exceeded. It exceeded the capacity. Understanding this changes how you respond to yourself. Instead of asking, why am I like this? You start asking, what has my system been carrying this whole entire time? And that question opens the door to healing because when you honor the origin of shutdown, you stop trying to force yourself out of it. You start rebuilding capacity instead, and capacity grows through safety, support, and permission to not be okay. This is where most people accidentally keep themselves stuck in that rabbit hole because when you notice that you're shutting down, your instinct is not curiosity. Your instinct is urgency. You feel time pressure, you feel behind, you feel like you're falling apart or falling off track. So you respond the only way you were ever taught. You push. You tell yourself to get it together. You raise the bar. You tighten the rules. You increase your expectations. You start talking to yourself in a tone you would never use with someone you care about. And on the surface, this makes sense because culturally, we are taught that effort solves everything. That discipline fixes comfort. That pushing through builds character. But shutdown is not a motivation problem. It's a safety problem, and pressure does not create safety. Pressure creates threat. Your system does not hear your internal voice as self improvement, it hears it as environmental input. So, when your self talk becomes harsh, urgent, or critical, your nervous system receives the message as, I am not safe, I am failing, there's danger here. And when a system already in shutdown perceives more threat, it doesn't mobilize, it withdraws further. This is why forcing yourself feels like hitting a wall. You don't become energized, you become heavier, more resistant, more numb, and then you judge yourself for that too. This creates a loop and a rabbit hole, shutdown, pressure, deeper shutdown, more pressure. And each time that loop runs, your nervous system learns trying equals pain. So next time things get hard, it shuts down faster. Not because it's damaged, but because it's learning. Another reason force doesn't work is because shutdown already involves reduced cognitive capacity. When your system is in freeze, your ability to plan, prioritize, and execute is limited. So, when you demand a high level functioning from a low capacity state, you create failure by design. It's like asking someone with a broken ankle to sprint and then shaming when they can't. That shame does not motivate healing, it delays it. Forcing yourself also ignores the reason shutdown showed up in the first place. Shutdown is a signal, it's communication. It's your body saying, this is way too much. I need support. I need relief. When you override that message with pressure, you teach your body that its signals are not welcome. So it learns how to shut down more aggressive because if quiet signals aren't listened to, the system just gets louder and louder. And this is also why so many people feel disconnected from themselves. They learned to override their internal cues for so long that their body just stopped offering subtle ones. So now the signal is just shut down, big, unignorable, disruptive, not to punish you, to protect you. Forcing yourself is also rooted in fear. Fear of falling behind, fear of disappointing others, fear of being seen as weak, fear of what will happen if you slow down. So instead of listening, you clamp down. But healing does not come from control, it comes from cooperation. Your nervous system does not need to be conquered, it needs to be understood. And here's the reframe that changes how you relate to yourself. When you stop forcing and start listening, you don't become lazy, you become regulated. And regulation is what allows capacity to return. Once safety is restored, motivation comes back on its own. Clarity comes back, energy comes back, not because you bullied yourself, but because your system no longer needs to protect itself. And this is why compassion is not soft, it's strategic. It tells your nervous system, I'm listening. I'm not going to abandon you. We can move at a pace that feels safe. And that is what allows shutdown to loosen its tight ass grip. One of the hardest parts about shutdown is that most people don't realize it's even happening. They don't label it as a nervous system response. They don't think, oh, I'm in a freeze right now. Instead, they think something much harsher. I'm being lazy. I'm wasting my time. I'm wasting my potential. I'm losing my discipline. I'm falling behind. And that's because shutdown doesn't always look like collapsing on the floor crying uncontrollably. More often, it looks like functioning just enough to survive. You might still go to work. You might still show up physically. You might still answer some messages. But internally, you feel disconnected. You're there, but you're not present. Shutdown often hides behind behaviors that look normal or even socially acceptable. Scrolling for hours, rewatching the same shows, zoning out while resting, staying busy with low stakes tasks, avoiding anything that requires emotional engagement. And because those behaviors don't look dramatic, you usually don't take them seriously. You tell yourself you just need more discipline or more rest or better habits, but the key difference between rest and shutdown is how you feel afterward. Resting leaves you feeling softer, clearer, more available. Shutdown leaves you feeling heavier, numb, disconnected, sometimes even more tired than before. That heaviness is information. Shutdown also shows up in avoidance that doesn't feel intentional. You don't decide to avoid the message, you just can't bring yourself to open it. You don't just decide to delay the task, your body just won't move. And this is where a lot of shame creeps in because on the surface, it looks like procrastination, but underneath it, it's paralysis. Another common way shutdown shows up is emotional flattening. You don't feel intensely sad. You don't feel intensely happy. You feel neutral or empty or fine. And because you're not in viable distress, you tell yourself, you're okay. But numbness is not the absence of pain, it's the absence of access. Your system has a reduced sensation because feeling feels unsafe or overwhelming. Shutdown can also show up as oversleeping, not because you're rested, but because being unconscious feels safer than being aware. Or it can show up as hyper focusing on trivial things like organizing, cleaning, doing tasks that don't require emotional presence. And these behaviors aren't random. They are nervous system choosing low risk, low demand activities to avoid further overload. Another reason people don't recognize shutdown is because it often comes after a period of high functioning. You were handling everything, holding it together, being strong. So when your energy drops, it feels confusing. You think, I was fine. I used to do more. What happened to me? What happened is not regression, it's exhaustion. And shutdown is not the absence of capacity, it's the result of capacity being exceeded for way too long. And here's something important: shutdown doesn't mean you don't care. In fact, it often shows up more strongly around things you care about the most: important relationships, meaningful goals, big decisions, because those things carry emotional weight. And emotional weight is what overwhelms an already taxed nervous system. So instead of leaning in, your body pulls back, not because you don't want the thing, but because wanting it feels vulnerable. Understanding this is powerful because when you stop interpreting shutdown as disinterest or failure, you stop abandoning yourself. You start responding with curiosity, and curiosity is what allows regulation to begin. Now, this is the part that everyone wants to rush because once you recognize that you're in shutdown, the immediate instinct is still to escape it, to get back to normal, to feel productive again, to feel like yourself again. But the way out of shutdown is not through urgency, it's through safety. And safety is something that you build, not something you demand. The first step is naming what happened without judgment. Not trying to diagnose yourself, no asking AI, what's wrong with me? Just acknowledging, I'm in shutdown right now. My system feels overwhelmed. This makes sense based on what I've been carrying. That alone matters because naming creates orientation, and orientation is grounding. When your nervous system knows what's happening, it no longer has to stay on high alert. The second step, is regulating the body before addressing the situation. And this is where people kind of get it wrong. They try to fix the problem first, have the conversation, make the plan, push through the tasks, but shutdown is a bottom up state, which means the body has to be addressed before the mind. Regulation here does not mean becoming calm. It means creating enough safety for movement to return. Slow, extended exhales, warmth like a shower, a bath, a blanket, a cup of tea, gentle, non demanding movement. Pressure through hugging a pillow or a weighted blanket or a friend, maybe. These are not self care cliches, they are biological signals. They tell your nervous system there is no immediate danger. You don't need to brace for impact. Once the body feels slightly safer, then the mind can re engage. And the third step is reducing the demand. Shutdown often comes from feeling like too much is expected from you. Too many decisions, too many roles, too many expectations, too many shoulds. So instead of asking, what do I need to do? Ask, what is the smallest possible step that feels manageable right now? Not impressive, not productive, not optimal, manageable. Maybe it's opening the document, not finishing it, sending one honest text, not over explaining everything, standing up, not fully exercising, drinking some water, not fully changing your diet. This matters because success at a small step rebuilds trust, and trust is what allows your system to come back online. And the fourth step is introducing safe connection. Shutdown deepens in isolation. This doesn't mean processing everything with everyone. It means one moment of being seen without pressure. One person who doesn't need you to perform. One interaction where you don't have to over explain yourself. One reminder that you're not alone in this. Connection regulates the nervous system faster than insight. And finally, the most overlooked step, practicing self trust instead of self surveillance. Most people monitor themselves harshly in shutdown. They watch for productivity, they judge their delays, they keep score, but healing requires a different posture. Each time you respond with gentleness instead of punishment, your nervous system learns something new. I don't have to disappear to be safe. I won't be abandoned for slowing down. And over time, that learning sticks. Movement returns naturally, energy returns gradually, motivation returns without force. Not because you fixed yourself, because you supported yourself. And this is how shutdown loosens, not through pressure, but through partnership. This is the moment where everything you've heard so far clicks into place because up until now, you may have understood shutdown intellectually. You may have recognized yourself in the patterns. You may have felt seen, but this part is about how you relate to yourself going forward. And the reframe is simple, but it's uncomfortable. Shutdown is not your enemy. Most people treat shutdown like it's something to fix, eliminate, or overcome. They see it as a failure state. They see it as a setback, proof that they are regressing, but shutdown is not a malfunction. It is communication. It's your body saying something important. I'm overwhelmed. This is too much. I don't feel safe enough to move right now. And when you interpret shutdown as an enemy, you start to respond with force. You push, you shame, you rush, and your nervous system hears my signals are not welcome. So it protects it a little more aggressively, but when you reframe shutdown as information instead of failure, everything changes. Here's the part people don't like to hear. You don't heal shutdown by becoming tougher. You heal shutdown by becoming safer with yourself. We're taught to build resilience by pushing, by overriding discomfort, by proving we can handle more, but your nervous system doesn't need more proof. It needs more permission. Permission to slow down, permission to be okay, permission to not perform through pain. And this doesn't make you weak, it makes you regulated. And regulation is the foundation of every form of sustainable growth. And here's what this reframe allows you to do. It allows you to stop catastrophizing shutdown, to stop seeing it as the end, to stop fearing it, because when you're not afraid of shutdown, it doesn't need to be taken over as intensely. Your body no longer has to shut everything down to get your attention. you start noticing the earlier signals, the fatigue, the irritability, the overwhelm, and you respond sooner. And this is how capacity grows, not by eliminating shutdown, but by reducing how extreme it needs to be. And another part of this reframe is understanding that healing is not linear. Shutdown doesn't mean that you're back at square one, it means you're human in a moment of overload. Progress is not measured by never shutting down, it's measured by how quickly and gently you return to yourself. And that is why the way you return matters. Each time you meet shutdown with compassion instead of criticism, you build self trust. And self trust is what tells your nervous system, I don't need to disappear to be safe. I can stay present even when things are tough. And this is the kind of healing that lasts. Not dramatic, but stable. And stability is what allows you to show up consistently over time. So if you take nothing else from this episode, take this. Shutdown is not a sign that you are failing at life. It is a sign that your system is protecting you from something important. And when you learn to listen instead of fight, that protection softens. Not because you forced it, but because it no longer needs to work so hard. And that is the reframe. I want to thank you so much for tuning into today's episode of Boss Up and Glow Up. If this episode resonated with you, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not broken. You are not lazy. You are not failing. You adapted. And now you're learning in a new way. Growth does not come from forcing yourself to function. It comes from building safety within yourself. And that is the real strength. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I really hope this helped you. I want you to give this episode a thumbs up, share it, let me know what part of this episode you liked the most and what resonated with you the most. Thank you so much. I hope this helped.